In today's video, I'm going to compare the top 5 flashes that you can buy right now. And even though I'm testing all of these on a Sony camera, you're gonna be able to buy these whether you shoot Sony, Nikon, or Canon, because there's variants of each of these flashes. And you might be asking, well, what about Nikon's flagship or Canon's flagship flash? I don't think they're really in the running. Nikon's flagship flash has not been updated in over 8 years, and Canon's flagship, I don't even know if they make it anymore. I think it's been sold out for over a year now. It just doesn't seem like Canon cares about it. So in this video, I'm going to look at what I believe are the top 5 flashes. We're gonna put them through the nerdiest, most detailed test I've ever done before, and at the end of this video, you're gonna be able to decide which flash is best for you. Let's get to it. I've got these lights lined up in order of cheapest to most expensive, and I'm going to do all of the tests in this video in this order. Let's start with the Neewer or Neewer Z2. This light is only $209. Next up, the Godox V1. This one is $259. Next, we have the Westcott FJ80 II. This one is $339. Here we have the Sony and the most confusing name of the bunch, the HVL-F60RM2. Do better, Sony, come on. This light is $548 currently, and finally we have the Profoto A10. This one is a staggering $995. Let's first talk build quality, and when you think about something that costs $200 or $1,000, you would expect there to be a massive difference in build quality. I'm pleasantly surprised and happy to say there's not. Taking this out of the box, I was blown away by how good this flash feels. The turning mechanism here is nice and smooth. The buttons on the back aren't going to blow you away with quality, but they feel great. And for $209, I am very impressed. The Godox light also feels good. Maybe not quite as good as the Neewer, but this one still feels great. Buttons feel pretty similar. And to be honest, so much about this flash is almost identical to this one. And I keep thinking, oh, they use the exact same part here, but when you really look close, everything is just slightly different. Again, for the price, the build quality on this flash is way better than I was expecting. The Westcott light, in my opinion, feels cheaper than the previous two. Not by much, but it's got, you know, a loud click sound to it that I don't like quite as much. This is the only flash that has a color touchscreen, which is pretty interesting. It's not the highest quality touchscreen or materials by any means, but again, for the price, I'm pretty impressed. I think it's pretty good. The only flash that I was really upset about when it comes to build quality is the Sony flash. The Sony flash has a very interesting twisting mechanism where it twists sideways like this as well as tilts backwards like this, and the feeling of this is just awful. I don't know if you can see this. See, the menu button is kind of already getting stuck in there. Being that this flash is $550, this does not feel high quality at all to me, and this is by far the least pleasant to use. As you would expect when it comes to build quality, the Profoto is the king. Ooh, the way that this feels and moves around is just beautiful. It feels so nice. The buttons on the back are the highest quality buttons of any of these by far. My only complaint, the way that you change the zoom angle of the flash is by turning this knob on the front of the flash, and this doesn't feel nearly as nice as any other part of the flash. So if they're gonna update anything, they could probably make that feel a little bit smoother, but that's probably nitpicking. The user interface and the way you actually control these flashes is so important, because if it's confusing and complicated when you're on set and you're trying to remote control some flash across the room, if you have a complicated user interface, you're gonna look like an idiot and you're gonna forget how these things work. Let's first start with the Neewer or Neewer light. Gosh, I hate that name. You turn it on with this button here. It's got backlit numbers that are always backlit. So this will never dim. I find this very easy to see, first of all, which I really like. Now, I could make this section on UI 2 hours long. I've had to read the manual on each one of these flashes. I'm gonna try to keep things simple here. This button layout is I would say it's average. It kind of reminds me of my old Nikon flashes. Certainly not easy. And if you've never used a Speedlight like this before, you're gonna have to read the manual, and then if you put it away for a few weeks, you're gonna have to read the manual again. It's not super easy to remember, but I would say it's average. The Godox light is pretty similar. It has an on and off switch, which I like, but it has a backlit screen that will turn off after a few seconds. I find that a little bit annoying. In terms of the UI and the button layout, again, I would say it's kind of average. It's not easy to figure out right out of the box, but if you read the manual and you use the flash often, it's not too bad. The Westcott flash has this color touchscreen, which makes things way easier than the other flashes. Instead of trying to find what button will highlight what you want, you just click on what you want and then you hit the up or the down button to make a change. We can go to the home button here. We can set this as the host, the client, which you may remember as the primary or the master, and then the client would be the slave mode. So if you want to use this remotely, you can. Or if you just want to use this as a speedlight on the camera, you could hit the speedlight button here. You can easily change the power output there. You can click on the mode and hit up or down, and it's going to switch between manual and TTL. This button here will turn on the LED light, which is cool. And if you want to go into the settings, you just click settings and you can turn everything on and off there. It's pretty easy and there's not much you can get confused about with this setup. My only complaint is that Westcott could do a little bit more to polish up this UI. Sometimes you can tap an option like this LED and I can cycle through different power settings. But then other times when you touch stuff, nothing happens and you have to use the arrows up and down. And if I wanted to change the power here, I can go up, 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 and you'll see it stops at 9. It won't let me go any further. But for the LED light, if I hit that and then hit up, 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 it's just gonna keep cycling through all the different power settings, off, on, off, on. I just don't understand why sometimes it stops and sometimes it's circular. It just feels like it's not quite polished. And I also wish that there was an option to have some sort of slide feature like you have on a cell phone where I could touch and then slide up and down to choose the setting. I think that would be a lot easier and a lot faster, but right now it doesn't work. This Sony flash probably has the worst user interface and button layout of any photography product I have ever used. I don't even really know where to begin with this flash. I've been using it for a week now. I've read through the manual. I watched videos on how to use it, and just the navigation and the button layout, without getting too deep into it, is insane. It's just so much more complicated than it needs to be. And to make things even worse, I played a little bit with Sony's remote control, and you would think that the remote control would have the same button layout. It has a similar button layout that looks kind of like this, but the buttons do different things. It is just crazy. Now, the only saving grace with Sony's UI is that if you plug it into a Sony camera, you can actually control this flash and other wireless flashes through the Sony menu, and it's much easier and more intuitive to do it that way. So if I'll go to menu and then external flash set, you can see here all of the same options that I have up here, I have down here, and I can just touch on what I want and I can make changes here. And that is so much more intuitive, but it's still kind of slow and cumbersome. I just wish that they had a better UI and button layout on the flash itself. The Profoto flash is definitely the cleanest, most polished UI of the entire bunch. It's probably tied with the Westcott in terms of ease of use. I mean, look at how simple this is. It's telling you that the air remote system is off. This little icon right here is telling you the zoom angle of the flash beam. It's telling you what curtain it's going to flash at. It's telling you that Bluetooth is on, it's got full battery charge, and then this is just the power output of the light. And instead of a fraction, it goes from 10 all the way down to 0.1. And you can make changes in 1/10 of a stop increments. To go into the menu, you simply press this button here. I can turn on the remote function if I want to here. And here you can change each one of the different groups. So I can press this button here, and then I can just make a change there. Press this button here, make a change there. Super, super simple. Again, there's not much that you can mess up. Now, when it comes to features, most of these flashes can do it all. However, there are a couple of things missing from a few of these. One of them, which I find to be very important, and I was shocked by this, Three of these, the three most expensive ones, do not have an optical slave mode, meaning that they see another flash and then instantly flash themselves. That is a feature that I use all the time. I just couldn't believe it when I noticed the Westcott didn't have it. And then I thought, well, I must be doing something wrong. The Sony has to have it. And after spending hours in their manual, I realized that they combined their manual with this flash and the last version of this flash, and the last version had that option, but they got rid of it on this one. And then they combined the two in the manual. Insane. And I was also blown away that the Profoto for $1,000 does not have an optical slave. That really bummed me out. And speaking very quickly about optical slave, I tested the optical slave on both the Neewer and the Godox. And the Godox optical slave worked exactly like you would expect. It was very sensitive and could detect flashes even if the flashes were firing like in the other direction. The optical slave on the Neewer was horrible. Not sensitive at all. You almost had to fire the flash directly at the front of this flash for it to work, which was shocking to me. Yeah, so I'm literally firing this flash at this one, and I know you probably can't pick this up on camera, but it is not firing. I have to fire it directly at. That's crazy. I mean, that's basically not even worth it. So if optical slave is important to you, the Godox is the only one that has one that actually works. These three flashes all have a multi-flash mode. So if you wanted to fire the shutter and then take multiple flashes while the shutter was open, these three flashes can do that. These two cannot. Again, kind of strange that the Profoto at $1,000 doesn't have that option, although for me personally, it's an option that I would never use. All of these flashes, except for the Sony, have a built-in LED light, which can be used as a modeling light if you are in a really dark environment, or in some cases, maybe you could even use it as an autofocus illuminator or autofocus assist light. I tested each one of these, and the two brightest and the only two that have a zoomable LED, they're actually behind the element that zooms, is the Westcott and the Profoto. They were both the brightest and they could zoom. You'll notice that the Westcott light is a much cooler white balance and the Profoto is much warmer. Some of you might prefer the Westcott because you're gonna say, well, the white balance matches the flash. And then others of you might say, no, I prefer the warmer light out of the Profoto because when I'm using a hot light, it's gonna be mixing with other warm hot lights. I'm sure that's up to each individual's preference. And what's really weird about Sony in this, once again, is that the previous version of this flash had LED lights, and then they got rid of them for this light. I don't know why. One other interesting feature that only one flash has is Westcott's freeze option, which gives you much faster flash duration. We're gonna test this out in a little bit. Finally, one other feature that's missing from only one light, the Sony, is an autofocus assist lamp. And each one of these other flashes has one. However, I tested all of these on my Sony a7 IV, and I couldn't get any of them to turn on. And I've done a little bit of research online about this. I also called Profoto and asked them about this. And I've learned a few things. First of all, the old style of autofocus assist lamps were infrared. They would shine like a red grid at your subject. And the autofocus system in a standard DSLR could pick that up and use it to autofocus. Well, with mirrorless cameras, they can't see that infrared light, and so it doesn't really work. That being said, each one of these lights, except for the Sony, has an LED light, so you could literally just shine a flashlight on your subject before flashing. And I can go into the menu on most of these and turn that on, and I went into the menu on my Sony and I turned it on auto, and even when I would put my hand over the lens to make it totally black, I couldn't get the autofocus assist to turn on any of these flashes. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, but it's definitely a feature that I used all the time when I was a wedding photographer. It can sometimes be difficult to focus when you're shooting really dark receptions, and having a flash with some sort of beam to help with that was huge. So yeah, that's something I still need to figure out. Each one of these flashes has a mechanical zoom head that will zoom internally to change the beam angle of the flash. If you have it set to auto, it's going to match whatever the millimeter you have set on your lens is. So when you zoom in with your lens, you can physically hear the flash zooming in on the flash head as well to match that field of view. I took pictures with each flash firing at their widest setting and at their narrowest setting. Now the Sony has the largest internal zoom range by itself, but it also has a wide angle diffuser that you can pop out, and that's going to get you the widest possible throw of light. And if you look at this image, I was really impressed by how even this light beam is. And when I zoomed in all the way with the Sony, you can see it's also the tightest. So Sony was the clear winner here. Now, when it comes to the actual quality of light that's being outputted by each one of these flashes, every photographer I've ever heard has said the round head is the way to go. It's going to create the smoothest fall off. It's going to create the best looking edge to each light. I don't know that I agree with that. There's no doubt that the Sony shape is more rectangular, but I think Sony's light fall off is probably the smoothest. Now, if for some reason you want to see the edge of that round shape of light, then yes, one of the round heads is going to be better. But when I look at the output of each one of these flashes, I think Profoto's might actually be the worst. You'll notice these little starbursts coming out of the edges. And so if you're looking for the smoothest light with the prettiest fall off, for me personally, it's not the Profoto. Now, when it comes to flash power, I definitely expected the Profoto to be the brightest. The Sony is the only flash here that still uses AA batteries, so I was expecting it to be the dimmest by far. Well, I was 100% wrong. For the first test, I fired each one of these flashes directly into this light meter. The easiest way to understand this is to give the first flash that we started with a rating of 0. And we tested the Godox. We also got the exact same power rating, so that will be 0 as well. The Westcott was 0.8 of a stop less powerful than these two. The Sony was 0.4 of a stop more powerful than these two. And the Profoto was 0.4 of a stop less powerful than these two. This means that the Sony flash was by far the brightest, but it was also 120% brighter than the Westcott flash. Now, we realize that this test may not be totally accurate because each one of these flashes could have a slightly different zoom range, even though we tried to get them all to be about the same. So we did the test again, and for the second test, we fired every single flash into a softbox, and then we took a reading outside of that softbox. So hopefully the softbox captured all of the light, sent it forward, and then we got a much more accurate reading. Because we tested the Neewer first, we'll start that at 0. In this test, the Godox was 1/10 of a stop brighter. The Westcott was 3/10 of a stop darker. The Sony was 3/10 of a stop brighter. And the Profoto was 1/10 of a stop dimmer. The bottom line is that the Sony flash is definitely the brightest and the Westcott is definitely the dimmest. The next test we did was for recycle time. And once again, I would expect all 4 of these lights that come with their own larger lithium-ion batteries would have much faster recycle time than the more powerful Sony flash that takes AA batteries. Well, once again, I was wrong. All of the flashes have almost identical recycle times, but the winner by a hair is Profoto. Next up, we tested the flash duration at every single power option for each one of these flashes. So I'm gonna put this chart up here and you can see every single number that we came up with. Now, as I mentioned before, Westcott has a freeze mode, which will give you much faster flash durations, but of course it will mess with your color accuracy, which we will be testing next. But that being said, Westcott's flash duration, even in the standard mode, were still faster. But that being said, we also just learned that at full power, Westcott's flash isn't quite as powerful as the other flashes. So that may be why at full power, it's got a slightly faster flash duration. If we're looking just at the standard mode of flashes, you'll notice as we stop down the power, the 2 best flashes are actually the Neewer and the Godox. Next up, I wanted to test color consistency. We want to make sure that the flashes have a consistent color output at the highest power and the lowest power. And so I tested this with one of the most expensive color meters on the market. For this, we did 2 different tests. We tested the white balance and a Kelvin rating at the highest and lowest power setting, but we also tested the CII, which gives you the magenta/green shift. And we came up with some pretty interesting results here. When it comes to white balance alone, the clear winner is Godox. Obviously, the Westcott in freeze mode, it has horrible color accuracy, but we would expect that. In normal mode, it's very good. It's actually second place. And surprisingly, the Profoto is by far the worst. I tested it at the lowest power setting of all the other flashes, and it had a variance of 522 Kelvin, but the Profoto also has 2 additional stops of flash power on the low end, which is a really nice feature. And if you look at that number, it gets even worse. A variation of 624 Kelvin. That is really bad. Now, if we look at the CCI test to see about the magenta/green shift, Profoto could potentially have won here if you measure it in line with all the other flashes. If you measure it all the way down to its lowest power setting, it was just off by 0.3, which really isn't too bad. Neewer comes in second place. Obviously, Westcott in the freeze mode is going to be worse, but again, we would expect that. And the other 3 flashes come in at 0.3 as well. Based on these tests, I'm going to say the most color accurate flash is the Godox, and the least color accurate is the Profoto. Next up, the test that I was most excited about was a wireless range test. And each one of these flashes can be used to control other flashes, just like it in a group. You can have multiple groups of flashes set up, and by changing power settings on this flash, I can control other flashes wirelessly and I can fire them wirelessly. Each one of these companies also creates their own remote controls. So you can either use one of these flashes as a controller or you can use a standalone controller. Some of these flashes had a range that was so far, I actually struggled to find an area with a long enough line of sight to do this test, but I finally found a spot. I went outside, I lined up all the flashes on this big piece of concrete here. I sat in my car and I drove backwards while I fired my flashes through the windshield of my car, and I could see the flashes firing in the distance. To my surprise, the Profoto failed quickly at just 135 feet. The Sony was next at 478 feet, which was quite good. The Westcott was next at 688 feet. Neewer, 1,039 feet, and Godox had an unbelievable 1,128 feet. From this distance, I could not see the flash at all anymore, and I could barely see the thing lighting up in the distance. It was crazy how far I was. Now, even though I was sitting in my car shooting through glass, this is still kind of a best case scenario because it kind of had direct line of sight. So for my next test, I wanted to put something in the way. So instead of firing the flash directly through my windshield, I held the flash behind my car seat. So the flash had to transmit the signal through the seat, through me, through the dashboard of the car, all the way to the flash. I drove close to the flashes and I tried to do this with the Profoto, and the Profoto would not work at all when it was behind my back. The Sony flash failed at 121 feet. Westcott failed at 220 feet. Neewer failed at 321 feet, and the Godox failed at 588 feet. Unbelievable. Now, I'm sure there are people watching this saying, something's wrong with this test, Lee. That can't be right. There must have been interference in the area, or your car was interfering with the test. There's no way that Profoto's range was that bad. I kind of feel the exact same way. I shoot with Profoto. I've got, Profoto remotes right here, and I shoot with their Pro lights. I did the test again in another location without my car, and I got the exact same results. The Profoto had the worst range by far, and I would just put it behind my back, and it wouldn't fire. Which was a shock to me. I don't know why. Now there's one other range test that we need to do, and we can do it live right here. Let me show you the potential problem. This is my Profoto B1 and a Profoto Air remote here. Watch. Fires, no problem, but watch this. Doesn't fire when it's close. Now many of you might say, well, who the heck gets that close to their light? I do all the time. I was just shooting product photography the other day, and I was getting very close to my camera with a light, and it wouldn't fire, and it's super annoying. So let's do a test where the flashes are touching. Can they fire each other? Okay. The Neewer flash does not fire when it's close. Godox does not fire when it's close. Westcott does fire every time. I've been using this flash for a week. I still can't remember how to do this. I think I reset it, so you have to pair these back again. Oh, it's still not there. Why? What is going on? Oh my gosh, I can figure out how to make one the commander, but not the other. I don't understand what's happening. All right, Sony, if you can figure out how to make it work, it will work even when they're touching. So it's so weird, but even though my professional Profoto lights don't work when they're touching, these Profoto lights do work when they're touching. Who would have thought? So if you find yourself close to your wireless flashes, maybe you're doing product photography, or maybe you're a wedding photographer and you're standing under lights, these three will have no problem with that. These two will. Next up, I wanted to test the TTL metering of each one of these flashes. It's basically the automatic setting of these flashes. If it has to decide how much power to output to get a correct exposure, can it do that? I positioned myself in front of a bright window so that I was totally backlit and totally underexposed. And for the first test, I shot with each one of the flashes on the camera, and I'm just being directly flashed here. Each one of the flashes got a correct exposure. Next, I tested TTL wirelessly. So I left one flash on the camera, but I pointed it away from myself. And then I set up another wireless flash off to the side. And in this test, I got very different results. The Neewer flash gave me a perfect exposure. Godox was wildly underexposed. So underexposed that I thought, surely I have done something wrong. And I double and triple checked. I took multiple pictures. Every single picture looked exactly like this. And I've read about other people having this problem online. I don't have enough time right now to try to figure out exactly what's going on or how to fix it, but this is a pretty serious problem. Westcott's flash was overexposed. Surprisingly, Sony's flash was pretty underexposed, so that's not good. And I would say Profoto's exposure was correct. So in this second test here, the only flashes that performed correctly were the Neewer and Profoto light. So to wrap this video up, what have we learned? I'm gonna start with my least favorite and move towards my favorite. It's most difficult for me to recommend the Sony flash because it's the most infuriating to use. It also doesn't have any other flashes in its ecosystem. So you're gonna have this very complicated small Speedlight, but you're not gonna be able to combine it with larger studio strobes if you decide to expand or you need more powerful lights. I shoot Profoto. I love Profoto. I was expecting Profoto to just clean sweep all of these flashes, but the fact that their remote system was so unreliable and had such a horrible range, the fact that the color accuracy didn't match the other flashes, and nothing else really stood out. I didn't feel like the quality of light out of this flash was any better. Yes, the build quality is a little bit better than the others, and the UI is nice, but it's just not that much better, especially for $1,000. If you happen to be a product photographer, I would definitely push you towards the Westcott. I really like the touchscreen on the back. I feel like it makes using and learning this flash extremely easy. This is the only flash that has the freeze option, which is going to give you much faster flash duration, but it's also going to mess up your colors a little bit. But in standard mode, it had very accurate colors. Product photographers work in a very confined space. You need the wireless system to work over a short distance, and this one does work reliably there. That leads me to my two favorite flashes from this review, which happen to be the cheapest, which is always great. These flashes are so similar, but there's just a few things that make them different. For example, the Optical Slave in the Neewer is completely unusable. The Optical Slave in the Godox works great. Using TTL in the wireless mode worked perfectly in the Neewer flash. It really underexposed in the Godox. Both of these flashes had significantly more wireless range over these three flashes, but neither of them work reliably when they're very close to the transmitter. I don't think you could go wrong with either of these flashes. If I personally had to choose, I would choose Godox because I use the Optical Slave function much more than I use the wireless TTL function. But again, that's gonna come down to your personal preference. Thank you for watching. I am so glad this video is over. I am done reading flash manuals for the rest of my life. Oh, and one more thing. If you're watching this, you're probably a photographer. Check out fstoppers.com/contest. We are running photography contests every single month. It's totally free to join, and we're giving away thousands of dollars in prizes. Again, it's free. All you gotta do is upload a photo. It's easy, and then we do a live critique at the end of each month. Check it out at fstoppers.com/contest.